Hello and welcome to another episode of The Defenders on Sunset TV. And in this episode, we are looking at a technology that the armed forces are quickly adopting across the world, and so is the case with the Indian Armed Forces, particularly after the effects that drones have had in the battle between Armenia and Azerbaijan, where large quantities of swarm drones completely immobilize large mechanized and tank forces. And now we believe that the war in Ukraine has again seen that Russia's vastly superior armored and mechanized forces have come to a knot when trying to engage with the Ukrainians, who are using high-end drone systems that are being provided to them by the United States and America's allies in Europe. But in India's case, we are still exploring what are our best options and where we can get maximum bang for the buck with indigenous technologies. And we have two experts who have been on our show before, and I'm delighted to welcome you again, sir. We have Air Marshal Lalit Kumar Malhotra, earlier the Deputy Chief of Operations at Headquarters IDS, and now in his distinguished capacity, both with Center for Air Power Studies, as well as his connections with think tanks in Washington, which I noticed on your visiting cards. And we have Dr. Rajiv Nayan, Senior Research Associate with the Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis, now known as MPIDSA. So, Dr. Nayan, you've been writing a lot of papers on drones and drone-related technology, and there are a whole lot of activities that are taking place. I think for us, there were some passive drone activities that were taking place vis-a-vis the Pakistanis on the LOC. But I think the standoff with China has completely altered the usage of drones and how we can look to enhance our ability to look beyond the trenches as well as to have impact beyond the front lines. Your views?
Definitely, you're quite right. Pakistan was just dropping some small arms, and it was some believed that drone was being used for dropping drugs also.
Yes.
So that was the problem, this border problem was there.
Yes.
And secondly, generally, drone was used as what we call ISR, intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance jobs. But now it's changing. The entire strategic map is getting changed because of the development, evolution of technology relating to drone. So now we have to pay attention to it. Now we are talking about China. So China, the moment you are talking about, we were focusing on medium altitude, long endurance weapon system, how to procure that. But now it forced us to think about high altitude, long endurance weapon system. And how to get it? We had problem, we all know that indigenous system was not coming to our terms, our security terms. So we had to look outward. And outward also, we had some success. We know we had some agreement with Israel, with United States under DTTI. We planned to develop some systems, drone systems, and it was coming. So now, thanks to Prime Minister, and you can also say this is a very tragic event which had happened in the country, and not only country, all over the world, that is Corona. So Corona in fact gave the potential to think about how to use drones. So initially it was in smaller categories, not in very high-tech categories, but now once you have started, once the momentum is gathered, then they have also started thinking in terms of using it for defense purposes, means not only mind but also body, means not only chips but also engines.
Okay.
You have to do both, not just chips which provide some semiconductor, but also engine. How you are going to invest in engines and development of that.
So it's as you brought out, and I'm aware, it's a phased exercise. First, the decision to acquire drones. The second thing is that where all do you get them from? Then the kind of policies that you have to have in place, and then the hands-on implementation. And no one better to explain to us the implementation of the drones than an Air Marshal from the Air Force. Air Marshal, sir, Now, I want you to, I mean, there was a term that I picked up in when I do my homework for these shows, and it's called about how the Air Force can influence the Army's operations with loitering ammunition. Now, what is it that drones can do with loitering ammunition? Does it come overhead and keep loitering and you move it in the direction you want it to? Or like a parachute, it loiters all above you and then lands in a DZ? What is it, sir?
Okay. Now, Mr. Maroof, I think first of all, if you permit me, I will just go into a little bit of a background.
Yes, please.
You see, drones or the UAVs, as you call them, unmanned aerial vehicles, have been in use for a very, very long time, even in our country.
Yes.
So coming about the technology, I think even a school dropout has been making drones in the backyard of his house,
Yes.
which are being used for marriages and various other things,
Yes.
which are flying about 20 feet above the ground. And they are taking those pictures. So that is what he was talking about, the recce and the surveillance. So the technology exists, even with the school dropout. And as far as the scientists are concerned, the DRDO in particular, I'm sure that they can do a wonderful job based on the technology which is already available. In fact, like you mentioned some time back, I wrote a paper and which has already been accepted by the DRDO. This is about the UCAVs, the unmanned combat air vehicles.
Okay. Yes.
Now, your question is actually more on the lines of the UCAV. Now, about the loitering drone. You see, basically, a drone can do a couple of functions. One being to go over there, to go to the area of interest, recce around, do the surveillance, come back. It can be programmed either in an autonomous mode or it is handled by the external pilot on the ground. Now, it is fairly difficult even to keep changing the external pilots on the ground. So you can always have a drone up in the air, which can loiter around for a very, very long duration of time. Like, for example, it can loiter around for a period of about 30 to 40 hours, which the drones of this capability endurance are already existing in the world.
Particularly the US uses it extensively.
Exactly. And thereafter, what it does is that if it is to be programmed against the enemy radar, the sensors on board are such that moment it picks up of any radars opening up, it homes onto that radar, and thereafter it can turn into two aspects. One, it can fire on that radar, it's something like the radar beam attack, or otherwise it can turn into a kamikaze kind of a drone, and where it can just follow that beam down and go and destroy that radar. Similarly, there are various other target systems which over the loitering duration, if you pick up in the forms of the surveillance and the recce, it picks up and thereafter waiting for a command from the external pilot, whether it is to engage or not to engage. So that is what the loitering would be about.
Okay, very, very nicely put. In fact, I remember reading some years ago a book on President Obama's foreign policy, and at one stage his foreign policy was being referred to as a drone policy, because he was trying to influence decisions, particularly in the AFPAC region, just by the sheer force of influence that drones would wield on a variety of situations. And those were more lethal drones. But Dr. Nayan, I want you to help us understand that this procurement that we were looking at, you talked about, COVID helped us with the procurement exercise. Is it part of the revolution in military affairs? Or is the procurement exercise purely in terms of if my adversary has it, then I must have it? Because the two countries I know which are massive, large-scale drone manufacturers are China and Turkey. And both are more favorably aligned to Pakistan than to India. So therefore, we needed to overcome or offset the advantage that Pakistan and China combined could bring to bear against us in a conflict. How is it that in the years that we have been talking of RMA, Revolution in Military Affairs, drones did not figure in the discussion to the extent that they should and as they do now?
As you mentioned, AFPAC region, and as our military friend talked about old technology, like it was in somewhere in our mind, but it did not become a dominant tool of warfare or dominant tool of, you can say, conflict. As long as it was not there, So I think the government did not think so much about putting money into it.
Did the government
missiles.
not think about it, or did the armed forces
general.
not recommend the government put money
No,
into it?
armed forces were asking for it. Armed forces ask all the weapons which they know that they could be useful. So that is not the point. But suppose you have got limited resources and you have to put those resources where you really need it, like ballistic missiles, cruise missiles. So those were quite in things, nuclear bomb. So drones started capturing imagination of the strategic security community of late. When, as you rightly pointed out, and I in fact, my first introduction to drone was because of this word Pakistan and Afghanistan when I visited Israel Aerospace Industries. And I asked you, where is that drone which is being used in Pakistan? So they showed us that drone, particular drone. And also I was really perplexed. Generally, we had the smaller drones, as we all talked, mini drones, micro drones, nano drones, all we are talking about. So in fact, that was the thing. But slowly, technology was stagnating. So this is one issue which was there. Not only in India, but globally, this technology was not taking off. So they were not thinking about its military mission, military objectives. The moment they started mastering technologies, or you can say other way around also, they started thinking about how to go to difficult terrains, difficult zones. So if you are going to difficult terrains and difficult zones, then you think about unmanned vehicles and now unmanned vehicles, in fact, is now changing the strategy of many countries. In the United Kingdom, you will be shocked to know that they are thinking about not to proceed with their submarine program, next generation submarine, because they are scared of unmanned underwater unmanned vehicles. Similarly, as once after the advent of missile age, there was a strong pressure on the acquisition of aircraft carriers, because they thought it is a sitting duck. So it also, in fact, it was factored in the procurement process or procurement policy. Similarly, once it also captured our imagination. And you talked about China. China is again in Houthi, who is supplying? It is China. Our drones, now it has been prohibited. 90% of them are coming from China. And you talked about Turkey. Turkey is a great example. How very fast, very soon, it was not a traditional arms exporters or a traditional great weapon supplier, major weapon supplier. Now it was basically one of the top five weapons importers from Russia. So that country has become a major player in drone industry, or in Ukraine. In Ukraine, it is Turkish drone which has been used. So look, we have suppliers. Unfortunately, I would like to bring out another point. That is MTCR, Missile Technology. Last time we discussed about MTCR. MTCR has got this drone also listed, but they pay less attention to it. This is the commercialization of technology which is taking place. So acquisition of technology from outside, I don't think would be so difficult on vis-a-vis drones. But the way it is becoming popular, not only for defense, it is for so many ministries. So we have to just push that, okay, as I told you, brain is there, semiconductor is there. So you have to build muscles to lift.
Okay.
To lift, so down you go towards that. So this is what this current strategy, current policy is. This liberalization policy, that drone rules which was brought in August 2021, its focus was to develop, to push indigenization of drones.
I'll come back to you with asking for more details on the new policy of 2021. But Air Marshal, sir.
May I just add on a little bit before you ask me the next question? You see that, frankly, if you ask me, I think we are a little bit too late.
I also agree.
We are absolutely too late into exploiting this wonderful weapon system, the drone. It's not only the government of India, I think it is probably the armed forces themselves have been not very proactive in the acquisition and employment of drones.
Exactly what I said to him.
So it is though unfortunate, but however, now I think we are waking up. Although we have had drones for the last, I think, about 2 decades plus, but we basically had them in the recce and the surveillance role and nothing beyond that.
As I said, passive usage.
And you will find that a drone technology, existence of the drone technology is making our hands a little stronger. We don't really have to import the technology. We have the technology, we just have to put it together. It's like a jigsaw puzzle.
Sir.
Not that who came first, the technology or something else.
Sir.
We have everything available. We need to put it together. And thereafter, there are so many attributes that what one can look at. Like you can have the size of the engine more, a better fuel efficient engine to keep it loitering for a longer time. Or, conversely, I can have air-to-air refueling in a drone.
Yes.
Why can't another drone go and do the air-to-air refueling onto this drone which is already existing and in the air? So you can
in fact,
improve the
that was what I was
loiter
coming
time.
to. You answered half my question.
I'm so
but,
sorry.
No, not at all. But briefly, that we have a lot of new technologies that are already in the anvil. Rustam drones, DRDO Swift and Ghatak UCAV. And then there is the HAL has the CAT system. So these are various variants of that have begun to be displayed in Aero India 2021. And they also have something called, and I just want your brief views before I go to him, that combat air training systems, which are part of what I'm sure the Air Force will be responsible for. So how do you optimally use these systems to effect, in a sense, somebody makes it, the end user is the military, or does the military approve what we make indigenously? Is the military involved in the design stage, in the guidance, or they make something? Because I think there is one shortcoming in our indigenous production, and that is the military and the end producer at home do not communicate till a much later stage, where it may be difficult to impose design changes.
We have had this kind of a problem in the past. You're very right about it that there has been no interaction between the manufacturer or the OEM and the user. You're quite right about that. However, over the years, I think we have all learned our lessons.
And we're improving.
We are improving. We are talking to each other. However, at the beginning stage, when you're on the drawing board stage, you are giving your qualitative requirements. So this is what I would like to have in my machine. And in case there is any doubt from the manufacturer, he would communicate further with you. Failing which, in any case, our people, there will always be some project teams which will be interacting with them to tell them that this is what we require.
A quick one, sir, before I go to Dr. Saab, and that is that unlike the Navy, the Air Force lesser, the Army much more, is completely, I would say, uninvolved with the design process. Whereas I have known that Air Force officers have been with the HAL program for the LCA, but the whole concept of design and structuring it cannot be left to people who are bright Air Force or Army officers who've just commanded frontline troops and then come in and take on a job, and by the time they get to grips with it, it's too late in the day for them to enforce things because the next posting is come or they say, nahi loge to rank miss ho jayegi. So there is a problem there.
There is, yeah. No, but we have already overcome that problem. Like how, at least in the few years ago, we used to have the project teams whose minimum duration of posting in a particular project was defined.
Okay.
So you would be there for the sake of continuity.
That is reassuring.
And even before the new team came in, they had an overlap of definitely about 1 year, so that then the person can move on for his...
Brilliant. So that is very reassuring. Acha, Dr. Nayan, I want you to explain a bit and briefly the drone rules of 2021 that the government has used as a bedrock for the booming drone industry now. How is the drone rule of 2021 different for the military and different for the civilians?
I will not say it's different for the military and different for the civilians. Government has tried to strike a balance. Look, when drone rules were brought in fact, security agencies were complaining, as we started in the very first segment, that Pakistan was creating problems and we are perceiving problems from China, non-state actors were acquiring it. So the entire focus was on security. As I told you, but Corona or COVID lockdown, whatever we call it, just demonstrated the great opportunity which drones can provide to the society, civil society. So you had to strike a balance. In fact, March 2021 rules, which had been brought in and which were withdrawn, were quite strict. They were more security specific and less about liberalizing or promoting industry. In fact, government government released that rules, some draft rules, and asked industry what we can do and what we can do to help you. So in fact, within a year, same in 2021, you had 2 set of rules coming, and those set of rules to encourage, both sets of rules were in fact to encourage, but as I told you, there was difference in the focus. So many, you can say, cluttering was removed and it was decluttered. Some forms, too many forms were to be filled in, and so those forms were reduced, fee was reduced. Then again, it has green zone, red zone, yellow zone kind of classification, and 90% of the area is now in the green zone. So means this is the liberalization, plus government gave incentives, and one of the rules which were formulated later, plus there were many drone identification, classification, so many provisions were there. So they just cut down those provisions which are not necessary, and identification rules were provided. It means you have to strike a balance.
Air defense systems worldwide are becoming ineffective as they can be easily overwhelmed by cheap drones and large swarm attacks by drones, and therefore the new generation of air defense systems are looking at laser-based and energy-based air defense systems as against the past.
You see, if you've ever seen a flock of birds which are flying around,
Yes.
you'll find that they keep changing directions more or less together, the entire flock.
Siberian cranes.
Yeah, Siberian cranes or any other, you can see the normal birds over the country. You see, basically it is a mother and a slave concept. Wherever the lead chap is going, the others tend to follow.
Okay.
Now in this swarm drones which you have talked about, basically it is a similar concept. It is a mother and slave concept, wherein there are so many, it's not just the number of drones. It is, there are so many drones which are differently configured and they can take on multiple targets. Now, in order to control them, you got to have a precise and a very good control from the ground. Plus, you got to pre-program almost each and every drone that he will, although following the path of the mother, but yet be able to take on the specific targets.
2 small questions, sir. One is the mother drone, does it require an extra amount of expertise to control? And the other is that are each of those swarm drones individually controlled?
No, they are not. In fact, it is a whole package which is going together under one control only, and thereafter they just take on the multiple targets at the time of commitment. Now, coming on to the air defense problems which you had asked me, absolutely correct. First of all, detection of drones is a problem because they are of a very low radar signature, very low heat emissions, and hence very difficult to pick up. However, there are now devices which have been already in service whereby you can pick up the drone attacks, or rather the approach of the drones. To tackle or to silence those drones, you got to use those, what do you call that, an EMF pattern. Okay, you got to have the microwave radar, a microwave, I would say that a push of a microwave RF frequencies, which will disable most of the drones in that particular swarm. However, to take on all of them, it may not really be possible. Some damage you will still expect. But majority of the drones can be taken on with that microwave kind of attack, whereby it's the radio frequency which you're interfering with.
Okay, very well put, sir. Very comprehensive, and we are completely out of time. But I think our viewers would have got a pretty good understanding about how drones have become now a very, very important force multiplier for battlefields, and how India is quickly catching up, though we entered the game rather late in the day. But hopefully, we will make up for lost time. And until our next episode, thank you very much for your inputs, and thanks for watching. Until then, goodbye.